Now, if you hear about the Illuminati, if you watch the movie Eyes Wide Shut, you hear about something called the Saturn cult and the Festival of Saturnalia. Why? Because these people trace themselves back to the progenitors who had originally settled on Saturn. So if you look in Eyes Wide Shut, when they're all wearing the masks, they do this dance where they go around in a circle, and that emulates the rings of Saturn orbiting. Because they trace themselves as the descendants of Saturn, and they believe that they're different from the rest of us, that they have extraterrestrial DNA that made them the gods. And that kind of is segueing into the next part of our talk. So there were a very small number of survivors when the moon was blown up, and they got out with only, apparently the story is, the moon was so badly hit that only a few of their damaged spacecraft got out, and their civilization on Earth was almost completely wiped out, so just a small number of them made it, and they crash-landed on Earth. And they then interbred with humans, which they were specifically warned not to do, and this created what we call, in the Book of Enoch, the fallen angels. Their offspring, their children most likely, the hybrids of their own form, which was about 36 feet tall, and native people on Earth, became these 12 to 13 foot tall, red-headed, white-skinned humans. And white skin was not normal for the Earth. And this is preserved in a book that the Vatican did not want you to read, that wasn't even found until the 1800s, but it's very old. It's as old as the book of Genesis, called the Book of Enoch. It's a very, very important text. And I'm going to be doing a lot more about this as I go on, probably writing it into my books. The Scottish explorer James Bruce discovered several copies of it in Ethiopia in 1773. It was translated in 1821. And Jesus quotes from this book in the New Testament, so he obviously thought it was pretty important. The key chapters are chapters 1 through 36, called the Book of the Watchers. And it says that this man, Enoch, was Noah's grandfather, and that he lived for 365 years. So he was some kind of extraterrestrial. Enoch acts as a messenger for what appear to be benevolent extraterrestrials who had threatened these people on Earth, the Watchers, with total destruction that became Noah's flood. But before the flood, before their civilization was wiped out again, because we're now talking about 12,000 years ago, the big Atlantean flood, they used Enoch as a messenger to kind of cut a deal with the good guys, the benevolent ETs, and say, would you please not destroy us? In this book, the Book of Enoch, it says that there was only 200 of them that descended. They became the fallen angels. Lucifer was one of the fallen angels, interestingly enough. He was the leader. The insiders I've spoken to have said it's probably a lot more than 200, that they had interbred here for some time. They had huge population numbers again, and this event, Noah's flood, completely wiped them out. It says in 7:5 to 6 that they were cannibals. They began eating us, and they begged God for forgiveness in 13:4, and they were turned down, obviously. And then a great flood was created to cleanse the earth of these so-called watchers, which they're still pissed off about and still punishing us for all these years later. Because we, i.e. non-extraterrestrial humans, were God's chosen, and they were the fallen angels, the cast-outs. So now they feel like they need to get revenge on us, and that we are the wicked and they are the just. And what does the Bible say? That the money will be taken from the wicked and given to the just. Well, that's how they justify the economic redistribution that they've done with things like the Federal Reserve, the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements. Now you see why I wanted to leak this all on stage at once. Okay? Stuff like this. But some of these people never died out completely. In fact, they've been around up until very recently in some cases. Let's look at the example of Easter Island. Jacob Roggeveen and C.F. Behrens, two Dutch explorers, visited there on Easter Island, first people from the West to get there, 1722. And when they got there, they saw 12-foot-tall white men with red hair that had long earlobes, just like you see in the sculptures. And then they were peacefully coexisting with the natives that were called Hamau Monoko. So you have these two different groups, Hanau Epe and Hanau Momoko. And the natives had shorter ears, darker skin, and a typical human height. So these giants actually spoke to the explorers. Apparently something happened afterwards where they were removed, And this brings us to a very interesting and highly controversial thing that's probably going to get me in a lot of trouble, which is the subject of stasis beings. What the heck are stasis beings? Apparently, some of the oldest people who got to the Earth, and this may be the progenitors, we don't really know, they had a very advanced crystal technology, and they left these crystal artifacts all around the interior of the Earth, deep, deep underground, in underground bases and things like that, in some cases natural caverns. You have these crystals that in some cases will glow with a blue light, and they can actually effectively create a time bubble where time basically stops inside the bubble. So you can then get inside this bubble when you activate the crystal properly, and there's obviously some kind of like a timer so you can get set up properly and then wait for the time bubble to kick on, and then the time bubble essentially keeps you so that you only experience like a few weeks, but it could be thousands of years on Earth. Now, there are apparently at least a dozen different stasis being areas around the Earth, as well as others where the crystals collapsed and didn't work. One of these stasis being chambers was found in Ohio, and I have now called it the Illuminati Disneyland. The reason why I say this is that you go into this, there's a river in Ohio apparently, there's a mouth down at the bottom, a big cave opening, you go in there, you walk in a long way, and then eventually what you see is a room that's about 60 to 100 feet tall, it's a dome, it's got black tar painted around the inside, and in the middle are 3 sarcophagi that are in kind of a Y shape around this thing in the middle that's a big crystal hanging on these supports with 4 poles, 4 pillars. The crystal is glowing, and there's some kind of time bubble that you can't get through. It has like a gravitational field. So they had to climb up the side and build like a scaffolding so they could look down and see what was inside these sarcophagi. And what did they see? They saw apparently perfectly preserved giant humans who were around 12 feet tall, 3 of them, all males with red hair, long beards, and, of course, still in stasis and still sleeping. Yes, and here's the crazy part. All these Illuminati guys were going to see it, and they were writing their names on the side of the cave to kind of like tag it, you know, like graffiti. And the name that a lot of people at the higher levels hear, the most notable name on that wall, guess who it was? Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln saw the stasis beings at Illuminati Disneyland. Now imagine the power of being in this group where you are told that you are the descendants of these gods, and you can go to a site like this that has a clearly advanced technology. For people in the 1700s or the 1800s, they didn't have anything like a glowing light. They didn't even have electric light. They just had fire. You have this glowing crystal suspended with these weird like wires or something hanging off of these 4 posts in the middle, and these people in sarcophagi that are giants with red hair, and they're still sleeping, and they look like they could come back to life. So this is where the Illuminati legend came into play, that, hey, these are our ancestors. These are our own family members. And the curious part is that different stasis chambers have been found all over the Earth, and in the different areas we find different types of humanoid extraterrestrials. They're not all the same. So it seems like multiple different groups found these time crystals and built stasis chambers, and the belief also is that the crystals are programmed to end their stasis as this energetic activation takes place in our solar system. So the Illuminati belief also is that as we get to the end of the cycle, these beings will reawaken, and that is the return of their gods.